Good morning, children. It's Charlie from Charlie's Flybox, and am sitting here with just a giant mountain of materials on my desk. It's getting a little out of hand because I've been doing a bunch of videos and I have not been cleaning up in between flies, which for a Type A guy like me is sort of driving me nuts. So I'm going to tie this one, and then I'm going to clean up my mess. But first, I'm going to tie you a Drunken Disorderly, a D&D. This is a fly from Tommy Lynch, and this sort of came on super strong a few years ago. And it's sort of a uniquely designed streamer in that it's not weighted, but it's got this wedge-shaped head. If I get that set just right, you can see that kind of doorstop wedge-shaped head that is deer hair with resin on it to make it hard and cut at a very distinct plane like that. So that it sort of augers in the water like the lip on a crankbait or Rapala, for instance. Rapala. Pretty neat idea. And this is sort of the mini version, which I think is much more appropriately sized for most of the trout fishing that I do anyway. I don't like to catch big giant fish. They pull too hard, make my arm hurt, and make me scared. I get all nervous. Regular sized fish are just fine with me, and big fish eat this also. So it also happens to fit on my screen very easily and doesn't take so damn long to tie. But I'm going to whip one of these up for you and try to walk you through the process. So I'm going to start. I'm going to take that one out, and I'm going to put a Gamakatsu B10S size 6 in the jaws of my vise. And I'm going to start off, we're tying a kind of silvery white grayish colored fly here. So I'm going to start off with some white Magpie Materials 110 denier thread. And I'm going to start it just behind the hook eye here. I'm going to just dress the shank all the way down to the bend. And then I'll run back up, and then I'll run back down. Now on these small flies, you can do a couple different things here for the tail. You can use a clump of flash. What I've been using is this UV polar chenille, and I just take some of those fibers off of the strand and make those into the tail. So to do that, what I'm going to do is take this and wrap it around my finger a couple of times. Let me get it all lined up so I can show you, like so. And then I can grab a clump, pull my finger out, and cut that clump off. So I'm going to cut that little clump off that center core. And I've just got a bunch of mixed fibers for the tail. And this ends up being about a shank length long on this hook, so that is appropriate length. I don't like the tail to be too long on any of my streamers, like so. So just sort of a ragged little tail back there. And then I'm going to put in a little rabbit strip. Now, I did this fly in my tying streamers book, and it used an entire whole rabbit strip to in each of the steps, and that was a full-size version. On this smaller version here, as I've been tying it, I've been putting the rabbit fur in a dubbing loop. So I've got some Chinchilla colored rabbit, which is this kind of black-white grizzly, kind of grayish colored rabbit strip. And this happens to be a magnum strip, which actually makes it real easy to get the right amount of fur. But kind of like what I just did for the tail, I'm going to pull out a clump of fur off the hide here and kind of get it squared up and then just cut it off like so. So I've got a little bunch. And while I was talking there, I made a dubbing loop. So I'm going to take this fur and put it in the dubbing loop and kind of spread it out. I don't want it too long. One of the things about this fly is it is downsized, so you don't want to get carried away with the length of anything. Kind of scale things down just a bit. And I'll put that in my dubbing loop and then spin it up into just a short length. That's probably, finished length of that bunch of fur is probably only 1 inch long. And I'm going to wrap this for a little collar back here at the bend. So I'm going to sweep this back after each turn. Watch that hook point. And then tie that off with my thread. Clip that loop out of there. Now you can see that's sort of bound down. It's just wound up around the hook point. Take my dubbing brush and sweep that all back. wet your fingers just a bit, and you can get a couple turns over that front edge to sort of clean that up. So just got kind of a little rabbit fur slash flash tail. Now for the body, it's more of this polar chenille. And I'm going to take a section of this, and I'm going to tie it in. I like to tie it in toward the front here. Not right up to the hook eye, but toward the front. Just helps to even out the underbody. And I'm going to begin to wrap this. Now one of the things, this is, I think this is large size polar chenille, and that's not too terribly long. If you have, if you're doing a smaller size fly, you can come in and sort of trim this material down, and I wouldn't trim it all after the fact because you get it a little too square, but you can kind of trim it like that just with your scissors to kind of rag it up and shorten it down a bit. And as I wrap, I want this to sort of wrap like hackle, in that you can see those fibers kind of fold back to one side. I can kind of sweep them back as I go. And I try not to overlap. That just creates unnecessary bulk. Just put one turn in front of the other. And I'm going to come pretty close up to the hook eye here, because there is going to be a little bit of overlap here at the front end. Cut that quill out, or that stem out, center core. I guess it's not really a stem, that's not a feather, but smooth that off a bit. And then again, I use the dubbing brush. That just keeps me from stabbing that damn hook point in my fingers. You can see we built a pretty bulky, shiny body out of that material without a lot of it on the hook, which is something I like on a streamer. Now we're going to throw in just another little loop of rabbit fur here. And you can see I'm making very short loops. I don't need a lot here. I'll grab another little pinch of rabbit. I'll put this in my loop. Spread them out just a bit. I like to cut those butt ends off just so they don't create too much bulk on the hook. Then I'll spin that up again. And again, these are just like 1-inch sections, not much. But what I find doing the dubbing loop rather than wrapping a rabbit strip is you just don't end up with quite so much bulk on the hook. That leather from the rabbit strip gets wet and heavy, soaks up a lot of water, and makes the fly hard to cast. And when you sort of build that into a fly in several different spots, you end up with a fly that's really not very fun to cast anymore. So I'm all about trying to get the same idea without all the weight. And that's the idea of that dubbing loop there. So a little collar there at the front. And then one of the characteristics of this style of fly is we're going to put a mallard flank feather over the back. Here's a nice one. So this one's relatively square tip. This is just a natural gray mallard feather. And I'm going to strip the butt end. So I've got something about like so. And I'm going to tie this in. I'm going to lay it down on top of the fly. And I want it to go about halfway up the tail. But I'm going to lay it down on top of the fly and kind of cup it around the fly. And you get a few turns on it. And then you can sort of kind of pull it down to length and square it up, get it exactly where you want, which is right there. And then I'll anchor it in place. Now, one thing that I don't do, and it's easy to sort of get looped into, is to just don't come in and cut this off. Invariably, what will happen is if you cut that off, when you go to tie this fly on your tippet, you'll pull on that wing by accident, and you'll pull it right out because there's no anchor. So I'm always going to fold that stub back and build the thread head over it, just so I've got a fold in there. That'll make a much more secure tie down. And then I can whip finish that rear hook. Nice smooth thread head there. Yep, and that's what we're shooting for. Okay. I feel like we might be a little bright there. There, that gives you a little better idea. So that's the back hook. So I'm going to put, just while I'm standing here, put a little shot of head cement on that thread head. And of course, articulated flies always go faster and more smoothly if you do each piece. You know, if I was going to tie a dozen of these, I'd tie a dozen of this piece right here. And then I'd go through to the next step and do that a dozen times in a row. It just makes things go a little bit more smoothly. It's actually pretty rare for me to tie a streamer start to finish, articulated streamer start to finish, if I'm not doing a video or a demo. Now for the front hook, I'm going to use a Tiemco 5262 size 4. And I'm going to start that same white thread. And I'll dress from about, a quarter of the way back from the hook eye, all the way back to the bend. And when I get there, I'll come forward again. I kind of cross hatch that thread base, just giving it some corrugation, some texture to the base. And then I'm going to use a piece of Senyo trailer wire. And what color you use doesn't matter. It's up to you. I've got some black right here sticking out of my bag, so I'm going to use that. And I'm going to tie this in kind of up here toward the front of the thread base and anchor it down along the kind of top far side of the hook all the way back to the bend, like so. So I've just got that piece of wire in there. And then you can put a bead on here, and I've got some little baby beads, and these are pretty small little beads. You could use a 3D bead in small size, just a single one of those. These are tiny little beads, but I'm going to put these on there just because they match up. I've got two sort of pearl colored baby beads. So I'm going to slide those on, and I'm going to find my back end and slide it on, and then I'll take that wire and push it forward through those two beads again. And I want to pull that loop down to just about a hook eye size. And I know that's not showing great right there. You can see just a short little loop. And then I'll anchor that down on the near top side of the hook and continue forward over that piece of wire back up to where I started. If you've got a little extra, you can fold it back, but I've talked about this a bunch. Everybody's so worried about this connection coming loose. I fished a lot of articulated flies in my day, and I typically fish them on at least 0x, if not heavier. And I've never pulled the wire off the back hook. So I don't worry too dramatically. If you tie that down good and tight, put a little glue on it, that ain't going nowhere, which has become one of my favorite phrases. So now I've got back here a rubber band from some asparagus. We eat a lot of asparagus around these parts. So I'm going to loop that around my vise, and that'll just hold that back hook back so it doesn't stab me in the hand. And now we're up here on our front hook, and I'm going to put a little shot of Zap A Gap down on that thread base. This is the spot at which I would tie all my dozen streamers together like this, put the glue on them, and then let them dry, so I didn't run the risk of putting my fingers in that glue. But I'm gonna do my best to not get my fingers in that glue for you this time. My big dog in the other room having a conniption. There's probably an Amazon guy here bringing my wife yet another package. Stand by, I'll make him be quiet. Be right back. All right, I hushed him up. So to continue on, I cut another clump of the fibers off of the polar chenille, and I'm going to tie this in for sort of a juncture between the two hooks. And again, because that glue is wet, I want to kind of keep my fingers off of it. I'll tie that right up to the beads and kind of let it spread out a little bit. You kind of manually distribute it, let it get around there, just cover that junction and kind of blend everything together. Got one long strand there. See, I got some glue on my fingers. I hate that. Now another little dubbing loop. If you're not very good at dubbing loops, this is a great fly for you because you're going to get a lot of practice at it. So another little dubbing loop. Another little pincher rabbit that we're going to throw in there. And this one I let stay a little longer, just again because we're going to cover the junction with it. I'll spin that up, and I'm going to wrap that right in front of that flash. Just sort of comb it back as you go. It's really, you notice how short these sections are. It's really easy to overdress streamers, and I see that so often. You know, what you're really trying to do is make a big fly with just a little bit of material, make a big outside profile. Makes a fly that swims and sinks and casts so much better than a fly that's just overburdened with a mountain of material on it. So I always try to keep things sparser than you think. All right, so now for the body on this, and here's sort of one part on this fly that was on the original that I don't necessarily buy into. But this fly usually has a rattle in it. I've got one with a rattle here somewhere. Can you hear that if I shake it by the microphone? I don't know that rattle makes any difference. It sure bulks the body up. If you want to add a rattle, right now is where you'd tie it down. I actually had some of the rattles in my little kit from when I wrote the Tying Streamers book. But I just checked that bag and there's no rattles left in it. So apparently I did use them up at some point. But at any rate, if you wanted to put the rattle in, that's where it would go. And since I'm not putting the rattle in, I'm going to take this polar chenille, tie it in, and then I'm just going to start wrapping. Now as I go, if I keep my bobbin sort of up close to the hook and work with a long length of material, I can kind of do this one-handed. Just fold back with my material hand. And I don't have to hand-to-hand this. And it keeps the material from twisting. And I'm just going to work right up to the end of that thread base. And you can see as I'm wrapping, a lot of this is getting bound down. I don't sweat that during the process. Once I get it there, I can tie it off with a few turns. Cut that out, kind of sweep everything back. And then I can pick up my wire dubbing brush or even the tips of your scissors to sort of pull anything that got bound down out. There we go. And we get that big shaggy body out of it with a lot of flash and volume without a ton of materials. You can, I know we've got a ton of light on that fly just because it's so dang shiny, but you can see there's not much in the middle of that creates a big outside profile without a lot of bulk, which is exactly what we're shooting for. Hey, guess what? A little bit more rabbit strip is coming our way, but first we're going to tie in a little bit of flash. I've got some Mirage Lateral scales sitting here on my desk, and I think it's going to work just fine. We're going to tie this in for the wing. So I'm going to take a long strand of this and fold it over my thread. And I've got 10 or 12 strands. And tie that down right on top. And then I'm going to cut that just about even with the end of that second tail. You can see here just where the tail of the front hook ended. That's going to add yet even a little more flash to the fly. Now we're going to throw another dubbing loop in here. So what do we got? We're on dubbing loop number 4 on this fly. You're going to get good at it. Like it or not, you're going to get better at it. Grab another little pinch of rabbit. Throw it in our loop here. No special tools required, just a couple of fingers. You can certainly use a special tool if you are a digit short, I guess, but otherwise you come factory equipped with the tool that you need to put rabbit fur in a dubbing loop. Nothing special there. 3 or 4 turns of that rabbit. Tie that off. Kind of sweep that back with your dubbing brush. And then we're going to add in a couple more mallard flame feathers. And I had a couple a nicely matched set here. Let's see where they went. There's a real nice one. Here's another real nice one. It's a little match set. And it doesn't take very big feathers on these smaller sized streamers. They don't need to be very big. So kind of same move. I'm going to take these 2 feathers and even their tips. And then I'll strip the butt ends like so. And I'll take one and put it in here on my near side. And I want it to just come up to just short of the tail. And I'll anchor it in place with several good tight turns of thread. And I'll take the other feather, put it on the other side, and kind of keep everything even. And anchor it in place. So that those are on either side, like so. And again, same move, we're going to fold those stub ends back just to keep those anchored down and in place. And then I like to throw just another turn of rabbit in there. So a short little loop. This video should be called How to Make a Dubbing Loop with Rabbit Hair. Another little short loop. Cut those butt ends off. Spin that up, and this is just going to cover that sort of thread head and build a base for our deer hair head to sort of butt up against. So you can see with this dubbing loop, I just got 3 turns there and barely covered any hook shank. So it doesn't create a lot of bulk on the hook, where the leather would just create a ton of bulk there. I'm getting a little close up to my hook eye, but I'm still pretty happy with where I am. Then I'm going to whip finish. So I'm going to find my whip finisher in this giant mess. Should be nice if I had somebody just come clean my desk off. So I'm going to whip finish that white thread, that 110 denier, and I'm going to come in with some 100 denier nano silk. And I'm going to start this thread just there at the front. If I can get a hold of it. There we go. I'm going to get that thread anchored good and tight on the hook. Right up against the front edge of that rabbit. Get all this hair off my lap. And then I'm going to get my deer hair here. And in the case of this fly, I'm just going to use some natural. This is some Varner natural. Late season, I think, is what this is. And God, it's just a beautiful piece. I'm going to cut off, an oversized clump for this little amount of space that I've got left. And I'm going to clean it out with my brush here over my trash can, get all that under fur out. So I've got a nice clean bunch. I'm going to stack this up in my stacker. For this size fly, you don't need an oversized stacker. This is just my regular medium Tiemco hair stacker. So I can even those tips up nice and neat. And with my thread right at the front edge of that rabbit, I'm going to lay this collar, just short of the tips of the rabbit. And I'm going to put 1 turn, 2 turns, 3 turns over the hair. Then I'm going to hold on to the tips, and I'm going to draw the thread tight toward me to flare it. And then I'll keep the thread tight and work forward through those butt ends. You can see how they're standing up as I go. So I don't want to work too far. Then I can kind of push those butt ends back. And we'll put 1 more bunch in there. So I'm going to take another, just maybe slightly smaller clump of deer hair here. And clean it out the same way. Now in this bunch, I don't need to stack it because the tips are going to get cut off sooner or later, so I'm going to cut them off sooner. So I just cut the tips off of that bunch. I'm going to slide that hair back out of the way, and I'm going to put the center of this bunch even with the thread there. I'm going to put 1, 2, 3 turns over it. And then again, I'll hold on to the hook. You may need to buy yourself a little room, kind of push back here. There we go. And let that hair spin around the hook. And I'll just work my thread through those butt ends, like so. I'm going to clean up around my hook eye, get my thread right up tight there. Right up behind the hook eye. And then I'm going to come in and whip finish right behind that eye. And it's going to be tight. I'm real tight. Get in there. There we go. Get one on there to get them started. There we go. Now we've got some room. One. Cinch that down, and then I can come in and trim that thread out. So now, to trim this fly, I'm going to use a double-edged razor blade. And I've got one here that's still in the package. So I've just broken it in half. And I tie I tie left-handed, but I am right-handed, so I have to hold this the other way to kind of show you what we're doing. But I'm going to take this fly, I'm going to start with my double-edged blade, and I'm going to trim the bottom of the head flat. So I'm going to go across the bottom of the hook here and try to trim this wide and flat. And we should have all our tips just on the top, like so. I may be able to do this where you could see it a little better up here. It's going to be awkward for me, but I think it'll work for you. So now I'm going to take my razor blade at the top here, and I'm going to try to make one smooth cut back to the base of that collar. Oh, that worked pretty good. That worked pretty good. I think you were able to see that. So you can see how that's just a wedge. All the hair on the sides is still long. I can square this bottom up a little bit. Yeah, that actually showed really well for you guys. Not my favorite way to do it because I can't see it worth a dang, but I'm going to clean up that front edge by the eye there. And then as far as the sides go, you want to cut a pretty big wide. You can either cut a pretty triangular shape like so, or you could go something into a much more wide wedge shape. To get that wedge shape, we're going to leave some length on the front and just cut back up these sides. And some of this work you've got to do with your scissors. It's hard for me to keep this symmetrical the way I'm doing this, sort of backward handed in the vise, but I'll make that sacrifice for you so you can kind of get an idea of what's happening, like so. And then I am going to take that out and kind of clean up these edges with my scissors. I just want to trim out the last of those butts, leaving that collar in place. And I know that wasn't on the camera because it was down here where I could see it. Here we go. Still the same fly. Didn't change anything, just had to get it where I could see it. So there's our general wedge shape there. Clean that corner up, clean this back edge up a little bit. And then I find very often if you kind of go from the back to the front, you can sort of wedge that up a little, even a little better. One of the tricks that Tommy Lynch told me about was taking your razor blade and bending it like so. And you can kind of cut a scoop out the center of the head here to get that nice and compacted right up close. Yeah, that's a little more like it. About like so. That's going to have to be done because I just dropped my razor blade on the floor and I'm not going to go chase after it. So we're going to call that good. I mean, I'll chase after it eventually, or I'll find it one way or another. That's our wedge shape. So now the eyes that go on this little sucker are just holographic eyes. And I like to use UV resin to attach them. So I'm going to take, this is Bone Dry Plus, which is a little gooier than Bone Dry, and put a pretty good wad on the side of the head. And then get my eyeball here and set it onto the side, kind of get them lined up. And then I use, this is a Tiemco rotary hackle pliers. I'm going to use the half-inch tool on the end of it to sort of position that eye and get it in place and hold him in place, and then I'll hit him with my lamp and glue him down. So then we've got that eye stuck on. The idea of using the half-inch tool is instead of using my fingertip and ending up with the resin all over it and gooed up everywhere and making a mess of it, That half hitch tool works just perfectly for those dome eyes. So I'm going to take another eye, put them on my near side, get them lined up. You know, you don't want one too far forward and the other one too far back. Where I'm in and up, let's see. After all that about not sticking your fingers in it, there we go. Hold him in place there. Zap him just to tack him down. So we've got our eyes glued in place. It's looking a little ragged on this side. Let's do a little cleanup. I mean, if it's worth doing, it's worth doing right, ain't it? And then as the final step in this slide, which is sort of an odd one, more resin right on top of this deer hair. So pretty good coat. You want to work it kind of down in there. Not into the collar, but onto the top of the head and the bottom of the head, all along the face here. What you're trying to do is harden this up so that this acts as that diving wedge, so that when you retrieve the fly, when you pull the fly, it'll make the fly dive and shimmy. And then we'll cook them up a little bit. Top and bottom cooked. A lot of guys will go in and put another coat on top of this. I don't think that that's necessary. You can go a little heavier around the base of the eyes if you feel like they might come out, but man, those ain't going nowhere. They ain't going nowhere, pal. I've got a few little butt ends down here on the bottom that I want to get rid of. Just pull those out with my finger. And that is our little drunken disorderly Tommy Lynch fly. Pretty cool little fly. It does swim cool. You know, as you pull it, it kind of dips and dives and does like the old Rattle from when you were a kid, or maybe from last Thursday, depending on what your view is on that kind of stuff. I like that stuff. So I just found a big crankbait in the back of my truck the other day. And I'm honestly not sure where it came from, but I ain't getting rid of it. I'll just keep that around just in case, you know, things get tough. But there you go. That's a drunken disorderly. I got no idea how long this video is. It seems like this slide takes a long time. It's just the same step over and over again. It's not, you know, like so many other streamers. It's not difficult steps. It's just a lot of them. Just time consuming. But cool little fly. You should tie some up. You should take them out. You should throw them in the water and strip them back to you and watch brown trout chase after them and eat them, because that is about as much fun as you can have if you're not, if you got all your clothes on anyway. There you go. I'm Charlie. You guys, thanks for watching.